All right, welcome. So yeah, I'm super excited to be the moderator and somewhat of a panelist as well with this esteemed group of podcast hosts and guests. Thank you to Matthew Bennett for pulling us together and creating this, cultivating this. Before we jump in, I just want to share a couple facts about podcasts. So podcasts are really on the rise. And there have been some studies recently about that. And so what I've discovered is that 57% of the US population say that they listen to podcasts. 78% of the US population has heard of the term podcasting, right? Back in the day, like people didn't even know what it was. So now most of people know what it is, at least. And then a significant amount of people are listening. 41% of the US population listen to a podcast at least once a month. And then I thought this was really surprising. On average, podcast listeners spend 5 hours and 39 minutes per day listening to audio podcasts. That's pretty wild. So I've got some amazing folks here. And as I said, both podcast hosts and people representing guesting on podcasts. And so to get things started, I'd love for folks to share briefly who you are, what your podcast is about. Or if you are more of a podcast guest, what do you often get asked to talk about on podcasts? So why don't I start with Maddox?
My podcast is called The Authentic Gay Man. I bring what I call everyday gay men, and it's not celebrities, it's not people that are world renowned. It's just people, guys, where they talk about their life's journey. The number one question that I ask my guests is, what is the most challenging thing you've had to endure in this lifetime? And then we just go from there. And I think it's about giving gay men a platform to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. And then it gives the listeners an opportunity to realize that whatever they're going through, they're not the only one.
Thank you, Maddox. How long have you been doing it?
The 17th of this month will make 1 year.
Nice.
I have published approximately 60 episodes, and I'm really close to breaking the 10,000 download mark.
Wow.
Milestone.
Awesome. Congratulations.
I'm getting an average of about 1,200 downloads a month now and feeling pretty good about that.
Hell yeah. Wonderful. And how about you, Dean?
I'm gonna bring this a little closer. How does that sound? Right?
Yeah, sounds great.
Good. Okay. So I actually am the shoemaker, right, who has no time to have shoes for himself. So I have a large background in technology and broadcasting and so on and so forth, mostly in the corporate environment. And as a result, I actually wind up never having time to do my own podcast, but essentially setting other people up and helping them turn into podcasters on the one hand. And what I decided to do was actually for marketing purposes, when I was really functioning as a mostly independent consultant, to function more, be on camera or on air as a podcast guest. So I've done a wide variety of podcasts because the areas that interest me, or I think that I have this, competitive edge, is what I try to focus on. And it falls in the world of personal transformation / innovation and bringing your authentic self to work as an innovator and so on and so forth. So it has this, it's interesting. And so I'm sort of launching into what makes you viable, what makes you interesting as a guest. And so, as I say, I try to focus on that. And I've done, as I say, some of them feel like very odd places for me to talk. And some of them feel like very natural places for me to talk. But I like that. Again, I've got the equipment so I can sort of walk in and make it easy for the podcast host to be a good and gracious guest. And by the same token, reflecting off starting with what Maddox started about, the kind of people that he looks for. I very much go through a discovery process deeply with whoever is running the podcast, so that I can feel that I'm prepared to come on camera or on audio and not hem and haw or sound unprepared, but to also give a strong sense of continuity for the listener. Like, I have something to say, and I want to try and get that point across. So that's a lot of what I have to do in terms of preparing as a guest.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Dean. And how about you, Kyle?
Yes, so I'm a guest on podcasts, on a lot of podcasts. I purposefully not created one because I'm mindful it takes a lot of energy and time and effort. Instead, I've been primarily on career and job search podcasts because I'm a career coach. And typically I'm asked about how to stand out in the job search, how to stand out when looking for a role, how to figure out what you want to do, what makes you fabulous. My specialty is senior managers and executives in tech in Silicon Valley. So typically I talk about that, or how to figure out what makes you fabulous. And then a smaller niche people often ask about is how I grew from Fiverr to working with Silicon Valley's biggest executives. So that comes up, and usually that intersection of coaching, tech, and fabulousness is what I love talking about.
Love it. I love that intersection. And how about Brian?
Yeah, I had a podcast for like a year and a half called the Gay Life Coach Podcast. That was after like 4 years working in radio. So it's kind of just like a natural segue. But then I put that on hiatus like a little over a year ago. I might reboot it. I've been a little preoccupied with music and coaching, and so there's a chance I'll put it back into action. But it was just a podcast, the Gay Life Coach Podcast. I would have different like guests on popular names within the queer community, and we would talk about everything from mindfulness to kink to therapy to sex to coaching to all the things. But I do guest on a lot of podcasts. I find that it's a really useful format for me because I have the music thing, I have the coaching thing. I'm like known for my actor days, like in some context. And so it's like a good place for me to sort of merge those worlds, because you can talk and like let people get to know you and tell your story, as opposed to like, single use formats, I guess, like social media, where it's a little bit more, you need to really pick a lane sometimes, I feel like. So yeah, that's sort of my little podcast journey.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. So you said you had your podcast going for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, great. And I'll share, I have a podcast called Queerly Beloved that I started about 4 months ago. I've got like 9 episodes out and a bunch more in the back office that I haven't launched yet. And my podcast is about the intersection of queerness and spirituality. So I'm interviewing folks who work in this spiritual or personal development fields, and getting really woo and really queer and having a lot of fun. I've got an interview later today, actually, that I'm really excited about. So yeah, what is the reason that folks have chosen to launch a podcast or to guest on podcasts? What are some of the whys? So, and people can jump in, but Maddox, maybe we'll start with you. Why did you start it, and what continues to motivate you to keep doing it?
I think it was a dual purpose thing, a dual reason. I knew that I wanted to put something out into the world, something out into the LGBT community that would move the needle, something that would make a contribution and help us all maybe be a little better and come together in some shape, form, or fashion. The other reason was I have further plans, another step that I want to take this down the road. And the podcast was what I saw it as a means to build an audience. So when I get ready to launch what I'm thinking about, I will have an audience to launch it to. So it really was about, getting the email list, building the fan base. At the same time I launched the podcast, I set up a Facebook professional page, and I'm just right on the edge of breaking in 12 months 1,000 followers. I've had to learn marketing. I've had to learn social media. It's caused me to grow in so many ways I can't even like fathom it all, to be real honest. There's a lot I'm aware of, and then there's some that's beyond my awareness of just the contribution that it's made to my own personal life that I didn't anticipate. Didn't see that coming.
Beautiful. Other folks want to share your why?
I'm somewhat similar to Maddox. I primarily work one-on-one with people. So I work with maybe 100, 200 people a year. So there's a limit to how many people I can serve. So podcasts, the articles I write, social media is a way for me to support way more people than I'm able to with a single coaching client. Another is leads. Podcasts, and part of the reason why I'm a guest on a number of podcasts rather than having my own is I'm able to then go reach other people's audiences and get out there. And then people often, when they connect with me or find me, say, oh, I've actually heard you on like 10 different podcasts. I've seen you on Forbes and then the Muse and then here. You're everywhere, Kyle. And then when they keep saying that 5, 10, 15 times, they're finally like, oh, okay, I'm ready. I literally actually just got someone while we were doing this, a PayPal from someone today who's like, oh, I saw you in a fireside chat like a year ago. I'm finally ready to do some interview coaching. So this kind of just drip, drip, drip and constantly being out there is one of the big reasons I do this, because then I can serve a lot of people, and then that select few that can really fit that service I offer are then there and able to work with me one-on-one and dive even deeper.
Wonderful. And before the next share, I just want to comment on that. You said that was something you did a year ago. And one of the things that is extraordinary about podcasts as a format is that it really has a longevity, really has a long life, right? A tweet lasts like 15 minutes, an Instagram, post lasts maybe 24 hours. A podcast sits there and it can still create leads, as we just saw proven with Kyle's lead from a year ago. And so that's one of the really cool aspects of it, is that it has this long life as a guest or as a host. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to build on that. There's this one podcast I did in, I think, 2021, and that one podcast, every month, without a doubt, I get leads from this one random podcast. And some podcasts, I never hear anyone from it or anything. And then other ones, I get people all the time. So whenever someone asks me to do a podcast, sometimes it's a student and they're just starting out and they're like, hey, will you be a guest? Other times they're big ones. Hey, will you do an article for my blog? Hey, can we talk on my YouTube channel? I always say yes, because I never know what that may result in. And sometimes it's clients, and other times it's just, hey, I talked to these 50 students and they got to learn about their career. So I'm always saying yes, or as much as I can, while being mindful of my boundaries. And it's powerful to just see that ripple effect and see what happens sometimes a year or 5 years later.
Absolutely. Yeah, the podcaster might not have a ton of followers now, but as they gather them, those old episodes still get listens. And so, yeah, you're really planting a lot of seeds. Awesome.
In the same light, a variation on what what Kyle mentioned is that I don't look for it necessarily for the direct leads, but that long tail, in essence of thought leadership, which is where it matters for me, as I say and it's, again, I want to be distinct. It's not necessarily in the quote coaching space that I focus where to put myself in podcasts, but more in the design thinking or innovation kind of world. And as I say, so that doesn't seem to apply as heavily to the one-to-one, but when I walk into a work situation, the body of, being pulled on as a thought leader or a subject matter expert is what's on top of mind for me when I come on as a guest, and how I present myself.
Yeah, that credibility piece. Yeah, thank you, Dean and Brian.
Yeah, echoing some of like what's been said. To echo like Kyle's point, I find it's a really like easy, fun way to sort of like market yourself, because you're just connecting with like another human at the end of the day, which is like a good use of time regardless. And on this idea of like it having a lasting effect, like people can find old episodes or whatever. I also found it really interesting when I was doing my podcast that like some episodes might be really popular and resonate with a lot of people and some not so much, but it was like you always have like a different shot at like having a successful episode. And just because like some aren't necessarily getting as much traction doesn't mean that like others won't like have like sort of a resounding effect, just because of the way podcasting works. Like people might scroll through and look for the topic they really want to listen to an episode on, right? So it's like it's good to just have like, I think, options of different topics people can find you on. And on Maddox's point, I think it is a really great way to like discover your voice, because like you have to constantly ask yourself like, what do I want to say? And if you don't know the answer to that, you have to like figure it out like as you go. So like, and then over time you develop like what your voice is. I started my podcast just because I wanted to bring more like a more mindful approach to very prevalent queer topics. And it was more of like a personal mission. But of course, like I also wanted to like market myself. But I found that anytime I tried to like strategically craft the episode in like a marketing way, it like didn't do as well as the episodes I just did because I was passionate or excited about it or wanted to like tell my personal story. Those episodes always did like so much better than anyone that I was like, oh, I think this will work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is often a different way of marketing, right? That you hear that you don't want to have an episode that's a big long sales pitch, right? But that the idea there is to allow the person to get to know you and to get a good vibe from you, get a good feel for who you are, and then to maybe offer some kind of pitch sort of at the end. But it is kind of a long game, right? It's like, people are potentially listening to you for, 20 to 45 minutes to an hour. And I think that is another distinction from social media, is that people are like committed and invested in a long amount of time, and they really get to know who you are in a way that folks don't from these shorter, quicker posts. Why don't we move into some sort of tips of the trade? And please, Maddox.
I would like to speak to something you just said, Will, and that is the know, like, and the trust. It has been overwhelming to me, the number of people that will reach out to me and talk to me like they know me. And at first I was a little taken back. I was like, what's going on here? And then I realized that over a period of episodes, they had listened to me tell my story. They'd listened to me talk through other men's stories. A few months ago, I met a man that I started dating, and at one point he said he was listening to my podcast, and I said, oh, okay, really? And about 2 weeks into the dating, I said, so how many episodes have you listened to? And he said, all of them.
Wow.
And I said, not possible. We've only known each other for 2 weeks. That's over 50 hours worth of content. How's that even possible? He said, I assure you, I've listened to all of them. And I said, wow, I have a very unfair advantage here. And he looked at me and I said, you know me like at a much deeper level because of all that you've listened to, and I don't have that same benefit with you. Of course, he smiled and he said, so let's change that. And he began to tell his stories. But you make a real valid point. It's crazy how, if you're opening up, my podcast, of course, is geared around very vulnerable stuff. We're all like, bearing our souls. And it draws people in, and then it does create that know, like, and trust very quickly. And I didn't see that coming either.
Yeah, thank you so much for that story, Maddox. It's already happened to me where I went on a date and someone had listened to Queerly Beloved, and I was like, oh no, wait, how do I feel about that? Right. And it kind of can become a calling card, not only for dating, but for our clients, for our potential clients, for them to really know who we are before we've even began that relationship, whatever that relationship is. That's a really sweet story. Why don't we jump into, and we will do Q&A at the end for sure, but thank you for, and actually, funnily, Craig, that was what I was going to jump into next, so perfect. We are going to talk about some tips of the trade. So yeah, Kyle, you were talking about, receiving requests to be a guest, and I'm curious to hear how often you're guesting and what your actions are to create that.
Yes. So now I do several times a month, sometimes several times a week. And over time, the more I'm on podcasts, the more people reach out and say, I saw you on this podcast or doing this speaking engagement. So something I would encourage people to do, even if you've never had a speaking engagement, is create a speaker's page. So then when people reach out, you have a page for them to see that you speak. I'll put something in the comments after I talk to share a sample speaker page, mine, and then a way for people to easily ask you, can you speak? Here's the date, here's the time, all of that. I found once I formalized that, I was getting a lot more requests and people reaching out. So once I was on podcasts, more people reached out. Once I had that page, more people reached out. And then I also reached out to podcasts as well. So if there was podcasts I wanted to be on, I would reach out. And I like setting little goals. I'm a paper person, so I literally have a paper planner. I probably spent 6 months trying to find the perfect one because I wanted a page for each date. It was perfect, and I searched everywhere for it. They have it at Target. I can send a link if anyone wants it, but I like setting little goals. So instead of like reaching out to 100 podcasts, what I will do, I don't do it anymore, but I would reach out to like one podcast every week. So then that's 52 podcasts a year you're reaching out to, and you can find a goal that works for you. But I love setting a goal like that. So you're slowly planting these seeds, and then different ones will reach back out to you over time. And you can do the same if you want to be a guest in articles, or if you want to be speaking in other ways. I love doing this, and that's how I've had so many articles, how I've done this podcasting, how I've done webinars is the exact same way. But I like this, so then all of a sudden you're not like, oh gosh, I have 20 podcasts I have to do this week. They're slowly throughout the year. So that's one of my favorite ways. And then speaking about the know, like, trust, something I found is I will often get people buying my packages before I even speak to them. So some coaches aren't a fan of that, but I have literally a buy now button on my website. So whether someone's never talked to me or they've talked to me, people pay on my website directly. There's a buy now button through PayPal. So some people will listen to my podcast or read my Forbes articles and literally buy my packages, and they're not inexpensive. I'm on the higher end for coaches without ever chatting with me. And I'm amazed. And before I hired my accountant or my financial planner or my graphic designer, I wanted to chat, but people literally hit pay now, hand over a large amount of money without ever chatting with me. And they said, I trusted you from your podcasts, from your articles, from your webinars. Wow. And then people who are on my consults will say, oh, I listened to all of them. And similar to Maddox, I'm like, there's a lot. And they're like, yep, I just went through your media page and did every single one. And on the consult, they say, okay, can I pay Kyle? I just wanted to talk to you and make sure you're real.
Wow. Very cool. And one of the follow-up questions was finding a good fit. So is there any strategy you use for when you are approaching podcasts to make sure it's one that seems worthwhile?
I'm happy to let other people share, but what I do is just see what their past guests have been like and past topics. I don't want to cover the exact same one, but I also don't want to be like way different either. Like if they mostly do careers and fabulousness and stuff, I'm a fit. But if it's a business podcast, I don't want to pitch them something completely different. And I try and customize my pitch. So say, here's 3 possible topics we could do. And here's how I would add value. How many followers I have, I'll share the podcast and make it really clear and quick about how I would add value. So I share those topics, I share how it adds value. Here's how many followers I have and I'll share it. And here's some past podcasts I've been on as well.
Awesome. Yeah, similar to when you're trying to get someone to write an article about you or your work, you want to do the work for the editor, right? And in this way, you want to do the work for the podcaster. And so you want to give them a sample of what you might be talking about, what value add. Yeah, those are some great tips. Dean, I saw you raise your hand.
Just unmuting. There we go. Also, I'm going to do something that may help a little bit. This may help a little bit also for those of you who've been challenged with my audio being out of sync with my video. I hope this is better. But in any case, 2 things I do that are slightly different because I didn't have Kyle to do all that for me. So I actually have used services, and I'll put one up. I use podcastguests.com. It is a subscription-based service that works in both directions, both for assisting you to find guests and if you want to be a guest. And so I receive every 2 weeks an email with a listing from both sides of the coin. It's very nice in the sense that these handy tools that Kyle's already developed on his own, or has learned from other places, they do give you where to standardize and put in your pitch and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of advice from there. There's another service that I use and recommend, Captivate.fm, and again, I don't want to be rude, but I don't mind paying for services of things that work. Some things are great for free, but sometimes it's really nice to know you're paying money to something that's really working. So what I like about Captivate.fm is it's very much as a service. Someone else has loved Captivate FM. So there you go. The service that they provide is not just the technical stuff of how to get the podcast online and where to put it and so on and so forth, but they have a huge program for you as a podcaster from all sides of it, everything from the marketing to so on and so forth. Captivate's not the only one. There's another one called Anchor, which is actually owned by Spotify. So be careful about that, knowing that. But the point being that finding these kind of services can help take care of the admin side, number one, and number two, just how to manage on a regular basis, getting your name out there and so on and so forth. If you don't feel like you have the time or just don't want to. So,
Dean, what was the name of that first service before Captivate?
Oh, sorry, I'll put it in. It's podcast.
Thank you.
I believe that's it.
So moving on. Yeah, did you have something, Brian?
Yeah, and also just like as far as finding the podcast, you can go to like your like Apple Podcasts or whatever you use to listen to podcasts and just like type in like the search word of like the topic you're looking for, and then maybe like cross-reference those with their social media accounts to see how many followers they have, if it's like a reputable podcast, or you can like read the reviews, see how many subscribers they have. But generally like per topic, there's, I don't know, anywhere from like 10 to 20 podcasts about it. So like if you like plug it in and like you'll kind of see the range of what you're competing with or looking to be on and that kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, and this might sound obvious, but I think that it's important for folks to listen to a podcast episode from a podcast that you might be interested in being on and seeing if it's a good podcast. Like, is this something that I would actually want to listen to? Right. And in a sense, when we are choosing to be a guest on a podcast and then promoting it, right, we are a gatekeeper for our audience. And so we want to be discerning about what we choose to put ourselves as a part of. And in the same way as a podcast host, it's important to be that gatekeeper and not bring on guests who are going to just be selling their, services, or, who are not prepared to speak to your listeners. So I think those are a couple extra points. I'd love to switch to the other side of the microphone from the podcasters and here's some tips on listenership. And yeah, Maddox, you have created such growth in a short period of time. So I'd love for you to share some of your tips for how you've done that.
Well, I post pretty frequently to my Facebook page, and then I share it out to my personal profile. I share it out in a couple of gay groups that I'm in, since my podcast is gay subject matter. One of my long-term friends who's a marketer said to me recently, I don't know, this has been maybe 3 months ago. He said, "You're never going to get there organically. It's never going to happen. You have to pay to play." And he suggested that I start placing Facebook ads. For almost the whole year that I've been podcasting, every Wednesday I do a Facebook Live where I just address some problem and present, a solution. They're 3 to 7 minutes long, and what I started doing was I would record my live on Facebook on Wednesday, and then shortly after I would place a Facebook ad, and I would use the video as the ad, and I would spend $5 a day for 5 days. So the ad would cost me $25. It's very low cost. And it has been amazing what that has done for me. Amazing what it has done for me. I went from getting almost no comments and very few reactions to my videos. And maybe I was getting 100 or so views organically. Now with the ad, I'm getting 600 to 800 views in that 5 days. I will get more comments, not a lot, but more comments, but I'm getting infinitely more reactions. One video will get 40 or 50 reactions. And of course, when they react to your video, then you can go in and there's a little invite button next to their name. And I invite them, and that's inviting them to subscribe, follow that page, and they become followers. It's been insanely effective. It's how I've gotten nearly 1,000 followers in just 12 months. And it's been much more exponential when I started doing the ads than before I was doing the ads. I also take that video, that weekly video, and I put it on my website as a blog. The blog is called Power Moments with Maddox. And so it's evergreen. It's there forever in a library. The first post on my Facebook page says, for a full library of Power Moments with Maddox sessions, click this link, and it takes them to my blog where they can thumb through and look. It's much easier than trying to find them on Facebook. My friend that's the marketer, we had breakfast on Saturday, and I was telling him some of the things I was doing. And he said, "My God, you've become a marketer." He said, "This is amazing. You have become a marketer." And I don't know that I realized that it was very affirming for him to say that. But yes, I've picked up all kinds of techniques along the way. I'm continually looking at ways to use social proof. Every week I do what our fans are saying about us, and I post it on Facebook, and it goes out to my mailing list. And I just harvest some of the comments off of either my videos or podcast episodes, and then put them in this post that goes out to the mailing list and to the Facebook viewers. Social proof is a really big thing. I'm using it in everything I do. I harvest comments everywhere I can for social proof, even for the little the events that I'm doing, the social events. people always have comments about, oh my God, this was an amazing party or whatever they say. I harvest all that and then put it in future invitations to parties because it works. Social proof really works.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Maddox. It's so impressive and inspiring how you have become a marketer, and self-taught, especially, is really impressive. We had a follow-up question from Thor, which is asking how you define your scope when doing the Facebook ads.
How do I define my scope?
I think that means like the demographic that you're marketing to.
Oh, the audience. Okay. When you go in, you can customize your audience. I pick men 18 to 65 plus. And then you pick the territory, and I pick the United States, and it always says plus 25 miles. So it gets a little bit around the parameter, which is a little strange to me. And then I pick topics like you get to put in keywords, and I put in relationships, interpersonal relationships. And then I type in some things that are just popular gay things, like a movie called Gay Love. I think I put in RuPaul's Drag Race or something like that, that just kind of draws our crowd, our people. And that's how I just played with the defining the audience, but yeah, that's what I've done mostly, and it's worked. So I just keep reusing the same audience that I've created. I'll tweak it a little bit from time to time to play and test, but those things that I've just mentioned are the things that I primarily use. And when you start to type in, it's like a pre-populated thing. You have to pick things. It's from a drop-down list. And so I've just kind of looked for things that had a gay subject matter to them.
Awesome.
I don't know what it's like on Facebook because I've never done ads there, but on Instagram, you can sometimes also, if you just want to take the lazy approach, is like select an audience. Like there's an option to like find followers that are similar to your followers. Like if you already have followers, it'll like automatically like try and find people who are that similar demographic of the people who have already gravitated towards you.
Cool. And Brian,
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Brian, while you're up, do you have anything to add to how you created how you got listeners during that year and a half that you had your podcast going?
Yeah, I didn't ever. It's funny because I do the ad thing now for like music stuff, but I never thought to do that back when I was podcasting. I wish I had Maddox in my corner at the time. But yeah, as far as how did I promote it, it was just a lot of like social media posts and often cross promoting on other people's platforms and or relying on sort of the audience of the guests to bring people in. So it was a little bit of a multi-strategy approach.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, one of the efforts a lot of people do is when you're getting a guest, you sort of get them to commit to sharing it with their audience. So yeah, go ahead, Maddox.
I can't say enough about the Facebook Live. It's pretty easy and it's free. You can do it as frequently as you want. You can talk about any topic you want to talk about. Now, I wanted to do it well, so I went through a course called Crushing It on Camera because I really sucked on camera in the very beginning. There was none of my personality there. I was like frozen. I was nervous. You put me in front of a camera and a mic, and it was, I'd watch the video and I'd go, okay, it looks like me. I don't know who that is. That is not me. And It took me a while, but this course, and it wasn't a cheap course, but it was worth every penny of it. It really taught me everything I needed to do. And I follow, every week when I sit down, I go through the steps and I do what they taught me how to do. And it's really been quite phenomenal. If you look at my first video, number one way back there, and then you look at the one I just posted this Wednesday, they're not even remotely alike. I mean, now it's really me on video. People get a feel of my personality, and I'm animated, and I'm the way I am in everyday life. And it was a process to get there.
Beautiful.
But they're fun. Now that I've gotten past the hard, this makes me nervous and anxious. Now they're fun. to do.
And the way that you use the Facebook Live ad is you market to the people who comment. Is that the main way that you're converting them from people who watch it to
Yes.
followers?
Yes.
Okay.
I just entice. I mean, the call to action on every video is, if you've liked what you've seen today, click the link and follow me on Facebook so I can continue to provide you with inspiration and tips to live your life as a more authentic gay man. And because that's the whole thing is about that. And my topics, everybody frets about, oh my God, I'm going to come up with the content. And I did that in the very beginning. And then there was this point where I just realized my life provides me with all the content I need. I start thinking on Monday before Wednesday. So what's the big thing that's been going on in my life in the last week? What have I been up against? Or what's come about, or what breakthrough have I had? And then I just go on and I talk about that.
Awesome.
So usually I don't even pick the topic until Wednesday morning. I say, okay, it's today. Let's do this. What are you going to talk about today? And I'll reflect back on the last week and I'll go, oh yeah, there was the inspiration right there. Today's Thursday. Yesterday's video was how I attracted the love of my life.
Oh, sweet. By having a podcast. So one of the things, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I do recommend like recording video while you're recording, because what you can do after is also like stitch your video on top of their video and create reels. I don't know if people are advertising on Instagram or TikTok, but reels have I don't really understand how the algorithm works, but reels have this way of like finding new people that you wouldn't normally find within your followers. And especially if people are ever venturing onto TikTok, if you post consistently on TikTok, like daily, and like show the app that you are demonstrating consistency, the algorithm will work in your favor. And if you have like these strong podcast clips from your episode, that people are gonna be drawn in with, then they'll go to watch the full episode, and then they'll eventually hopefully be a subscriber. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Is there an app that you use to create those? This is me asking for my personal sake.
When I was doing my podcast, I was working with a podcast producer who created those materials for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, your TikTok game is really on fire, Brian. So we just heard Maddox use the term call to action, CTA. And so, as we start wrapping things up, we have talked about this as a marketing funnel. So what are some thoughts on effective CTAs as both a guest or a podcast host?
I think I did a LinkedIn webinar with this group before. I get so many clients from LinkedIn, so I am not a huge seller or pitcher in these. So often I just encourage people, follow me on LinkedIn, Kyle Elliott with 2 L's and 2 T's, or visit my website, caffeinatedkyle.com. And I will find a lot of people do follow me. I get a ton of followers on LinkedIn after this, because I post a lot of content there, and I find people show up on LinkedIn with a different mindset. If we're on Instagram or Facebook, I'm not on TikTok yet. I can't do it because I know I'll get hooked, because I got Instagram and was hooked. But when I'm on Facebook or Instagram, I'm just scrolling. But on LinkedIn, people are there with a purpose. So I find I get a really high conversion rates on LinkedIn. So my call to action is always for people to follow me on LinkedIn. So I get a lot of people following me there and then reaching out and saying, hey, I saw you in this webinar. I've been following you for 6 months or a year. And it's that long game that you mentioned, Will. I get so many followers from this, and then people eventually reach out and convert from that content. So that's typically my call to action.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on CTAs? Dean, maybe, or Maddox, you have another one? Yeah.
Just trying to think about a lot of, there's been so much and very rich stuff going on here. I think as a futurist, I want to suggest too that that podcasting can be a wonderful thing, but as for instance, as Maddox is using, you can also think about stretching yourself into doing things with other environments. Twitch, for instance, if you feel like you might find an audience there. It's a different kind of world, right? The Twitch world. Um, the use of TikTok has become widespread and crazy hot for advice and learnings and lessons. So a lot of this kind of stuff can apply over into that, and they may be a little bit more lightweight than saying, "Oh, I'm going to set up a podcast. In other words, when you're committing to doing a podcast, and I think it's important to also, as other people may have said, if you're really committing to doing it, you really, for fairness for yourself and for your audience, I think you should really commit to how are you going to make the arc of these stories go right over a season. How are you going to be in this for the long haul? Which is again why I decided to not necessarily really invest a lot as a podcaster. So.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. One of the stats that I didn't share at the top of this is that 75% of podcasters discontinue their show within 12 months of starting. So most people start podcasts, and we have so many podcasts out there, but you'll notice that a lot of them have like 2 episodes. And so it really is the long game, staying consistent, doing it for a long period of time.
Well, it's like running a business when you think about it, right? It's like running any kind of show, right? You have through lines and stories and so on and so forth, and sustaining that takes work.
Absolutely.
I
Matt,
love what. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I love what Dean said about different platforms too. Like, I didn't know this, but my aunt says she's does a lot of Excel stuff. You can go on TikTok and like Google, or I guess TikTok or whatever the word would be, TikTok. Like, how do you do a sum in Excel? But TikTok is a search engine. So a low commitment thing, and a number of my coaching clients do this. They'll do like a daily 60-second TikTok or reel or whatever it's called, where this is just like a daily video you post. So it could be like a shorter podcast. So instead of committing to a 30 or 60-minute thing, you can post these short things. So I find everything we're talking about today, as Dina's saying, can really apply to shorter stuff as well, without committing to that, which I love. I love that idea, Dean, that you don't have to do a podcast. It can be a TikTok or IG or a LinkedIn post or an email newsletter or a blog. You can apply it to anything else as well.
Yeah, all these modalities of getting ourselves out there. I want to move into Q&A, but if I saw Maddox, you had something, if you have something short and sweet, or Brian, I thought you might have something short and sweet. Otherwise, let's move into Q&A.
I just wanted to say that in my studies before I launched my podcast, there was a lot of conversation about something called podcast fade. And it is, in the first 90 days of your podcast, it's all glamorous. All of your friends and your relatives and everybody are making a big hoopla, and you're getting all this attention. And then about 90 days in, it becomes kind of, everybody's seen it, everybody's heard it, and a lot of the hubbub like really simmers down. And because I had been really made fully aware of what that is, and that it even has a name, podcast fade, and that I needed to anticipate that and be prepared for it, it made all the difference in the world for me. Because when it simmered down, I thought, oh my God, it's dying off. I mean, it was it a flash in the pan? And no, I just kept on publishing my episodes and just kept going. And then it began to pick back up and start to gain the momentum. But there is definitely a period in there where you have podcast fade, and that's when most people fall away.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I want to acknowledge, I just saw Mark had a podcast for 4 years. Mark my words, amazing. I saw that Rick also has a popular podcast that's helping him funnel new clients. And so there's also a lot of expertise in our guest pool today as well. So as we move into Q&A, if folks who also have podcasts or do a lot of guesting want to share some wisdom, you're welcome to as well. So if folks have specific questions, you can put them in the chat, or you feel free to unmute yourself and just speak up with questions or comments as we start to wrap things up today.
Well, if I could just speak for 10 seconds. First of all, thank you, everyone. We'll say at the beginning, I pulled this together, and this has been way beyond my expectations. This has been great. I've been sitting here taking notes and deciding what to do next for myself, and I'm sure everyone else has been feeling the same. One thing that I would add, I've been on quite a few podcasts, never be afraid as a guest to say, can we cut that bit? I found myself in a situation where someone would ask me a question that there was no answer I could give that wouldn't get me cancelled. And I sort of tried to speak around it, and it went horribly wrong. And luckily, one of the two hosts on that podcast, they said, you know, let's cut the last 5 minutes. But sometimes it's just necessary to say, I don't want to have that bit. And as a guest, I've also said, I want to hear before you put it out, please. And, you know, just I don't have to hear my voice for an hour if I've been talking for that long, but it's useful.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for helping to cultivate and create this, organize it. Other questions or comments as we wrap things up?
Yeah, I got a question. This is a resource question. I'm actually in a situation right now. I need to move all of the archived episodes of my podcast, which are currently on my website, just to live somewhere differently. I was using the Blog Talk Radio network platform with a network on there called the Life Coach Radio Network, started by Russ Terry, but he's shut that down. And so I need a new place to just host the old recordings for now. Would anybody recommend a good service? Is there a place free to do that, or low cost?
Anybody got that? A resource to give to Mark?
Hey, Mark, it's Rick. I would actually, if you have access to them, just get them downloaded onto a backup file, like a backup drive somewhere. Hold them there for now. That's what I did when I moved the Coming Out Lounge from a radio environment into podcasts. I had all the shows backed up because the company I worked with went out of business. And then I relaunched everything with those shows. But I had them on my system. And then when I found podcast websites and Captivate FM, they became my hosting company. If you were to go to a hosting company, you can just go you could go host them anywhere. I mean, you could go to, GoDaddy or anywhere and find a hosting company to store them. I know you got.
I meant to store them for access for people so that the links.
Okay, then pick any host. I mean, you're going to probably look at like Captivate or.
So the same kinds of
same
services
sort of thing.
that were mentioned.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a little new to that side of it. So okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other final questions or comments?
So I have several guys on this call. It's interesting to see some of these people. I haven't seen some of you since you were guests on my podcast. But one of the things I would say is, if you're going to do it, be consistent. Your listeners will hold you accountable. Trust me. And I love it that my listeners hold me accountable, because sometimes there's a glitch. And I'll wake up, I've already checked, everything was good, and then suddenly something happens, and I'm halfway through my day, and I'll get an email from an avid listener like, hey, Rick, did you know this happened? I'm like, oh, hell no, I didn't know that happened. And so then you got to back up and go find it. But I've been through the ringer. I'm at episode 553 on one of my podcasts and episode 210 on the other one. And the consistency is what gets it. I'm very fortunate that they're both very, very small niche, but I have a very loyal listener base, and on average, we get 15 to 25,000 downloads a month between the two podcasts. And I think I posted in there, this one of the things, that's the only marketing I do for my coaching practice, literally. and it fills my practice consistently. So I'd be glad to talk to anybody too. I usually can't even make these calls, and today I was like, okay, I can come in for the last 30 minutes and like listen. But it's a great way to market. It is work. So you got to be sure that you're committed to the work. That's the thing.
I want to add one more thing, if I may. As you notice, I think most of us have paid a lot of attention to the quality, and so
I'm switching back to the good mic. Really intentional. Just remember too, if your audience is primarily going to be listening to you, then they deserve to hear you in the best light possible. Audio fatigue, frankly, is much worse than video fatigue when it comes down to it. If they hear muddy sound after a while, they just won't listen. So that's number one. So I what I'm getting at is that, get your technology, it's not super expensive, but get your technology in order, get your setup in order so that you can be consistent, it's quiet, so on and so forth, all that good stuff. Do the same with your guests as best as possible with them. So again, treat your guests, meaning the audience, give them the very best you can. It doesn't cost an awful lot, but it does mean paying attention to that too.
Thanks so much, Dean. So we have just 2 minutes until we are officially done. So why don't we just put in the chat a word that
Kenneth, I think Kenneth has his hand up as well.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Kenneth. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. I had a quick question. I think consistency does matter. I've been an invited guest on a podcast once or twice in the last couple of years. I'm really considering this for 2023. Rick, I heard you talk about numbers of episodes. Kyle, Maddox, I've been following the post you dropped in GCA since you started yours. My question, real easy, is how often? Rick, those of you that are part of the panel, do you drop once a month? Do you drop every 2 weeks? The podcast that I was on, he actually drops an episode once a month, but it's only like 6 months out the year. I was honored to be a guest on the podcast, but I'm really for getting up to be consistent with a follower base. How often should you be dropping a podcast episode?
What I've heard, the ideal is weekly, but I don't think there's one magic equation for it. I think consistency is the most important aspect. Maddox, briefly, do you have anything to share?
Yes, for the first year, I did every Tuesday without fail. I announced at the beginning of 2023 to my audience that moving forward, I would be publishing every other Tuesday, and I gave them specific reasons why, and got lots of positive, reactions to that. So I am now doing every other Tuesday. Awesome. And it I don't think it matters how often you do it, as long as you do it consistently.
Yeah, great. And there's some more info in the chat too, some other shares around that. Thanks for that question, Kenneth. So thank you. So it's the time is done, but please put in the chat something maybe you're taking away or a word that you're present to as we finish our time together. Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you, Maddox. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Brian. Thank you again, Matthew, for organizing. This has been such a joy, such a pleasure. And I hope that it planted some seeds for new fabulous podcasts from our GCA membership. Have a wonderful day, everyone.